Welcome everyone, StealthyShiroean here, and today I'm bringing you my review of the Humble Choice bundle for April 2023. Apologies for the late review, but better late than never, right? This month definitely feels like will be hit or miss depending on what games interest you, but at least nothing was an all-out stinker. Let me know what you think of this month's bundle as well in the comments below. Be sure to check the timestamps for specific games, and stay tuned for my final thoughts in the end. Okay, let's get to the review. Starting us off this month is Founder's Fortune. This game is a colony/colonist management sim that blends many of the ideas from RimWorld with The Sims. So first off, there are no in-game tutorials, which is an immediate turn-off for me. Luckily I played RimWorld before, so I kinda knew what to do. Unfortunately, these games are really slow, especially in the beginning, so any sort of dive into the gameplay is even more cursory than usual. My hour with the game was merely trying to set up my colony and not much else. The graphics itself don't do much to sell it for me, but then again neither did RimWorld's, and I like that game. Since it is in 3D, the game had little things that I felt set itself apart from RimWorld, in a good way. First, the ability to build on different levels was neat, and I'm sure people more creative than me can come up with crazy building designs. Also, it seems that building and decorating is something meant to be easy and provide a ton of choices similar to building in The Sims. I also thought other things were neat too, to be able to see like the character's facial reactions for different things, or even the little details of a limp my one character had. I know some of this stuff can be portrayed in RimWorld, but much of it was only revealed when you clicked on the character and read their log. Outside of RimWorld elements, it also borrows a lot from The Sims with how the characters can interact with one another, down to the wish and reward system. I think it's neat that they added it in, although I'm not sure it does much to make them feel anything like real people, since it all seemed arbitrary. Overall, I'm not sure how I feel about this one. I liked it, but I also been itching to go back to RimWorld and The Sims 4 for a while, which both do their own things far better than this game. For something just a bit different, maybe there's something worth playing here if you give it the time. Next up is Revita, a roguelite platformer, and to be honest, that's all that really needs to be said about this game. For the sake of giving it more of a review, the game plays roughly like any other game like it in its genre. Much of it is based around the fine line between how much health the player wants to sacrifice for upgrades versus how much they'll need for defense padding if they get hit. The idea is the player becomes better at the game and turns into a glass cannon that can deftly dodge out of harm's way to keep the optimal damage on enemies. Personally, this wasn't anything special for me. It has nice pixel art, decent gameplay, and I did like the music. I guess the developers are planning a big 2.0 update that will bring a lot of additions, but I don't think it would be anything to bring me back to it. I feel like I say this a lot for roguelites that get tossed our way in choice, but nothing here was standout in any way, and I'm sure I'll forget this title before the end of the month. Monster Prom 2 Monster Camp is a dating sim visual novel game. In this, you're trying to hook up with a monster date for the meteorite shower. Now, normally this wouldn't be something I'd be into, but I did actually play the first one. Not that long, mind you, but I wanted to give it a try because I liked the art, and it was a game that definitely didn't take itself seriously. Trying to find a monster for your date aside, the game's writing is pretty raunchy and probably offensive to some. They do have some options to turn certain things off, but I would imagine if this isn't your type of humor, then it probably won't be enjoyable for you. That said, I would usually not gravitate to a game with writing like this, but I think the game is just different enough for me to enjoy. Game sessions are fairly short, being only 30 minutes or an hour depending on the length chosen. Each game plays out over a series of events that allow you to learn about the characters, as well as give various stat buffs. The other cool thing about Monster Prom, and another reason why I bought the first one, is the ability to play with friends. I played the first one a couple of times with my wife. I can't say we liked it too much, but I think it's also because it wasn't quite the pacing we wanted when playing a game together. That said, I could still see this as being pretty fun with a group of people, especially if you're each trying to romance the same monster bachelor or bachelorette. While I'm not sure that I'd be returning to this anytime soon, I still think this one could be fun to try if any of it piqued your interest. The Life and Suffering of Sir Brante is a visual novel with a strong emphasis on player agency. So first off, if you don't like to read, then this game will be a quick pass for you. There's a ton of reading, but luckily I think the writing is decent. You play as Sir Brante, a boy born to a noble family but with a commoner background because of his mother being a lowborn. Players follow the boy's life from the day of his birth all the way until his death, or his true death anyway. As mentioned on their Steam page, each choice players make will have boons or consequences that affect other choices in the future. This seemed pretty meaningful, but I can't help but feel a bit cheated when a choice would be grayed out. Previous choices obviously influence the current situation, but it's a bit difficult to know what sort of stats you should be trying to build if you even have the option to do so. That said, that's kind of just life in general, and hindsight is always 20/20, so maybe a second playthrough with this is necessary to get the most out of it. I also want to point out my appreciation for the world building the devs created. Upon first playing it, I figured I was getting into a fictional but realistic medieval world. But I was happy to find that they created some lore for the world and a strong emphasis on their cosmology and how it directly links to the caste system the world abides by. Also, their use of death in the world's lore and how it applied to gameplay was pretty neat. Overall, I'd like to return to this. If reading is something enjoyable for you, then I'd suggest giving this one a go. Next is Life is Strange 2, which is a narrative-heavy game akin to something like a point-and-click. Although I own the first one, I never played it and I have no idea about the plot of the game, other than there is some sort of supernatural element tied to a teen drama. Seems similar here, with players taking the role of Sean Diaz, a teenager looking after his younger brother Daniel after a horrible accident leaving them on the run. These games live and die by how good the narrative is, and I can't really say after spending a little over an hour with it. But I was intrigued and wanted to know what would happen with these two boys. Gameplay-wise, it reminded me a lot of Telltale games, which I think are good for telling great stories. But they falter for me in that the choices made largely don't affect the overall outcome of the story. Which is fine, but that also means don't expect having vastly different playthroughs. Take all that with a grain of salt, however, because I don't really know if that's how Life is Strange is or not. One other thing to note, and this is more of a nitpick, but I wasn't a fan of the character models. Maybe I'm so used to seeing hyper-realistic facial reactions with big AAA modern gaming, but I can't help but feel that Life is Strange 2 doesn't look that great. I think I'd feel a lot more connected to these characters if they looked a tad bit more realistic, or if the developers decided to take a stylistic approach like what Telltale did with their own games. Either way, this game was a good reminder for me to play the first one, and maybe someday I'll get back to this one. Rollerdrome is a mix between trick roller skating and third-person shooting. This is something that is definitely different, and I found it to be rather enjoyable despite not being very good at it. In this dystopian world, you're a contestant in a roller skating deathmatch, where you need to kill everyone in incredible style. When playing this game, I couldn't help but remember my time with Ali World just a few months prior, so it wasn't that much of a surprise to find that it's the same developers. That said, much of my time here was spent mashing buttons on the controller because I couldn't remember what did what. The tutorial was a dump of information, but this game definitely seems to be something that you could only really learn by just playing. All the controls did feel tight and responsive though, so any errors made were always by me either not clicking the right thing or not being situationally aware. And the gameplay can get pretty hectic with projectiles firing off at you and people trying to bash your brains in, all while you're just trying to perform some tricks. I spent my hour just getting a feel for the game, but in order to progress you need to complete a certain number of challenges to move forward in the campaign. I imagine with time I could get better with it, and it certainly does seem fun. Although I'm not quite sure how much time I'd actually put into this, definitely try this out for a unique mash of gameplay. In the penultimate slot, we have Aliens Fireteam Elite. This is a cooperative shooter in the same vein as Left 4 Dead, but it has an Aliens backdrop. I've only watched the first movie, which was years ago now, so I can't really comment as to whether the devs nailed the aesthetic or not. All the set pieces that I played through seemed fine, and the xenomorphs were more or less how I remembered them looking. Except, I was surprised with how many of them there were and how easy they were to kill. I guess Ripley wasn't a colonial marine, so she was bound to have some issues with her lone xenomorph. But this seems kinda ridiculous. But I guess I'll just set my expectations aside for the sake of the game. Unfortunately though, I can't say that this really changes much from the formula from what I've played in other games. Combat plays as a third-person shooter, and you're fighting hordes of xenomorphs, which are basically zombies that could crawl on walls. I didn't get the sense that they pose any different threat than enemies in any other game. They're different classes as one would expect and a gear score, so I imagine there's some grinding in order to play the higher levels. I'd say this game is only for fans of the franchise. I could see myself playing it again just for the sake of something different, but I think something like Strange Brigade or World War Z would be what I'd go back to if we're looking solely at third-person Left 4 Dead-like shooters. The final game of the bundle is Death Stranding, the obvious bundle seller this month. After the whole fiasco with Konami, Kojima decided to leave and create his own studio, with Death Stranding being the result of that. To be honest, I'm not really sure what kind of game Death Stranding is solely from the gameplay, mainly because most of my time with the game was akin to watching a movie. From what I played and what I remember from trailers, it's an action game, but it's centered around delivering packages from point A to point B. And to be fair, that was one reason why I wasn't that excited for this game on release. The bit that I played shows that the developers put a lot of work into creating an intricate movement system, which I imagine could be fun and also relaxing. But this definitely isn't just a package delivery game. Despite not encountering any action gameplay of my own, the game does provide a lot in the beginning as to what kind of world you're entering when playing it. It's weird and dark and intriguing and vague. Really, really vague. Which brings us to the second reason why I wasn't too interested in playing this game at first. Once again, after experiencing the first hour with it, I'm definitely excited to continue playing to try unraveling the story and the world Kojima and his team created. The game itself is also beautiful to look at, and the big-name actors filling roles really help to sell the game further. Actually, I was really surprised to see Léa Seydoux playing a role in Death Stranding, since I had just finished watching No Time to Die the other night. This is a game that I definitely plan to return to without a doubt, if only to experience more of the gameplay and decide if I really want to stick with it long term. Okay, let's wrap this up and see if this bundle is worth it or not. I based my rating solely on whether I thought the game was worth playing on about an hour or so of hands-on gameplay. Also, I'd be grateful if you could please give the video a like if you're enjoying it, because that really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm gods. Overall, this month is one of those lukewarm months. Nothing in the bundle was bad, but much of the bundle wasn't really that great either. I felt that the games here were either laying in the realm of mediocrity, or were games that are too niche for me to wholesale recommend them, or even to want to play them right away myself. But everyone's preferences are different though, so if there were any in the bundle that did call to you, then by all means grab the bundle. But getting to the recommendations, let's start from the top as usual with the must-plays of the month. And I'd put Death Stranding in this spot. While this might not be strange to many of you given Death Stranding's positive reputation, it is a bit weird for me since I felt like I had maybe 15 minutes of actual gameplay in my whole hour with it. But the weird and dark setting along with the insane production value really pulled me in. Kinda like this guy. Following up in the strong recommendations is once again just one game, being Rollerdrome. I'm definitely not good at it, but I really like that the devs did something different here, and what they made is quite a bit of fun on top of that, even if I never managed to complete enough challenges to finish the campaign. And in the week recommendations sit the rest of the bundle, being The Life and Suffering of Sir Brante, Life is Strange 2, Monster Prom 2 Monster Camp, Aliens Fireteam Elite, Revita, and Founder's Fortune. The Life and Suffering of Sir Brante almost sits in a strong recommendation, but it's not the type of game I would usually play, and since it's dependent largely on whether or not the writing is good throughout, then it's hard to say. Life is Strange 2 falls in the same pitfall. It seemed decent, but I wasn't exactly sure. And I know it's not quite the same genre, but I felt Death Stranding blew it out of the water, paling it just a bit more. Monster Prom 2 felt too niche to me, and since I played the first one I knew what to expect going in, which has also made me not that keen on returning to it anytime soon unless I'm really craving something different. The last three, being Aliens Fireteam Elite, Revita, and Founder's Fortune, all suffer from the same problem, which is that they're all just mediocre games. Nothing really bad about that, but they do barely scrape into the week recommendations, since I know that I probably won't be touching these games ever again. And that wraps up my thoughts on this month's bundle. On an objectively not bad month, but not a whole lot going for it either. Do you agree with my thoughts? What games, if any, are you looking forward to playing? Let me know what your thoughts are, or if there are any different recommendations you'd make in the comments below. I hope this video helped you in some small way, and if it did, then please consider leaving a like, comment, subscribe, or whatever it is you feel like doing. Thanks for watching, and have a nice day.